Good evening, committee members. It is 5:30. We have a half an hour to achieve quorum. I do believe we have it in the building somewhere, so as soon as we get him in, we will start. I'd ask committee members, please take your seats and sign in. Good evening, committee members. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you for those who have been able to attend the 5:30 session today for Budget Committee of the Whole. I'd ask that you put your electronic devices on silent and you're properly signed into the system. At this time, I would like to acknowledge Laura Bubanco joining us today, coming from Fort Erie. And I'm confident there will be a better introduction coming from the CEO and or chair at the 6:30 meeting, but I just wanted to acknowledge and welcome you, Laura. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Seeing none, the motion that was left off at the previous Budget Committee meeting is on the screen. It has already been moved by Chair Caslin and seconded by Councillor Burrows. Councillor Quirk as the seconder, as Councillor Burrows is not here. As the quorum was lost at the previous meeting, we will resume where we left off. And so it is on the floor, and if I'm not seeing any speakers, I'm happy to call the question. Can we open the speakers list? Councillor Timms.
So I just wanted to be clear in this motion what the status of the 1% we did last year for corporates or for infrastructure. At the end of the process, we threw a 1% on at the end of last year. I'm assuming that's in the base already and that we're not going to do the same thing at the end of this process this year.
Through the chair, you're correct. It's inside the base.
Okay. And then the second part was the status of the 1% for housing. what happened with that?
That was deferred, Counselor?
Okay, so it is coming back when? In the fall. So the suggestion of that motion was that we approve the 2% and then we add a 1% in the fall for, especially for housing.
I'd suggest we can't even talk about it because it's been deferred, and
So,
consider the
all
matter
right.
when it does come back.
So I just want to be clear that when I'm talking 2% now, I have to be in the back of my mind thinking about making it 3% in the fall because of social housing.
All
And I
options are,
understand that's what's the process, and that's what I'm asking.
yes, Counselor, all options are on the table. This is guidance only. Information will be brought back for our consideration and deliberation at that time.
Okay, so I just want to make it clear, at this point, I'm saying 2% all in, everything, no more.
Yes, Counselor.
That we don't get into a long discussion. We all were very clear last meeting as to where we were going with this. And I don't think that anyone that was sitting in the room objected to the notion, but giving us more time to work out the detail of it.
Thank you, Counselor. I recognize that point of order. You are correct. Counselor Timms, I'd ask that you no longer speak to that matter as it has been deferred.
All right, so I'm speaking to the motion on the floor here, and I want to be clear that I'm talking 2% guidance, all in, nothing more. So when in the fall, I'll be taking that same position. And if we have to sort out priorities in the process in order to be able to do that which I'm not allowed to speak to in the fall, there's got to be room within this structure to let us do that, because I'm not interested in anything more than 2%. So that's, I guess, hopefully that's clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Thank you very much. We do have another matter, report CST 13-2017. That's the budget control bylaw. There is a brief presentation preceding this report. Ms. Murphy, at your convenience, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Barrick, councillors, staff, anyone watching. Tonight, I want to talk a little bit about our budget control bylaw, actually your budget control bylaw. So the desired outcomes for tonight is really to deal and to get a better understanding of the budget control bylaw, and in particular, its connections to the enhanced financial management service. Understand the control structure relating to the division of authority between staff and council. Offer clarity on how and where the bylaw impacts ABCs. Demonstrate how it supports value for money recommendations around control. And finally, to establish that it is a best-in-class bylaw. So EFMS. In February 2016, the region rolled out EFMS, which standardized and automated many of our business processes. The following are some examples of the improved service. Access to real-time corporate-wide information, which enables timely decisions, a framework to reduce risk and increase financial controls, a reduction in applications and process redundancies, and enhanced accountability through stronger reporting tools. So this slide helps demonstrate one of those improvements, primarily a framework to reduce financial risk and increase financial controls. So one of the key processes that was introduced with EFMS was commitment control. And this allows the region, including over 350 operating and capital budget owners, to better control expenditures. And this is done by checking actual expenses as well as future financial obligations against available budget. So what this means in layman's terms, no budget, no authority to spend, or even to set up a requisition, because budget checking is done at the requisition level. So while EFMS established a process and provided a system to enable commitment control, a policy to formalize accountabilities is required to allow adjustments when these transactions are deemed necessary. So the main purpose of the budget control bylaw is to establish those controls that would permit adjustments to budget, providing flexibility for staff and council to alter plans as circumstances change, all the while ensuring appropriate authority is in place and guaranteeing transparency and accountability to the public. So this bylaw applies to regional departments, court services, Niagara Regional Housing. The Niagara Regional Police Service, Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority are excluded from the bylaw, with, of course, the exception to submit their requirements. So prior to establishing the bylaw, there was a very informal process. With this bylaw, we're providing clarity on adjustments and amendments, and the differences between these two are highlighted in this slide. The main difference being that amendments result in increased budget expenses through either reserves, debt for capital projects, or an increase in the tax levy or rate requisition, which is very rare, never in my lifetime. The most important thing when undertaking an amendment is recognizing that there is no delegation of authority. All amendments require a council report as well as public notice to ensure the community is made aware of any planned increased use in public funds. So why do we need this? Allow me to walk through an example. So on the left side here, we have an actual budget adjustment that was processed earlier this year. It relates to the employment survey. In one team fashion, organizational performance, SAEO, and economic development all agreed to give up funding within their respective budgets to support the 2017 employment survey being led by the planning department. The funds moved did not increase the overall budget of the region, and each respective budget owner had to sign off on this adjustment. On the right-hand side, we have an example of a budget amendment. Last year, Council agreed to support the Sports Commission. However, the 2016 budget had already been passed, and there was no budget room identified at the time. As a result, Council elected to make a budget amendment to draw from the Taxpayer Relief Reserve. This amendment resulted in an overall increase in expenses in the region and required Council's approval. Public notice was also required preceding the amendment. So Council authority. So now that we're clear that amendments require Council approval, let's look at adjustments. For budget adjustments, we've recommended $1 million, and for capital, we recommend $250,000. Again, just identifying that all amendments, regardless of amount, require Council approval. A question was posed, why $1 million for the operating budget adjustments? So these limits reflect approximately 0.1% of the average gross operating and capital budgets, respectively. Staff have also looked to the procurement bylaw in setting these limits. So we believe that these limits, the limits that are set, allow for timely operation of regional businesses and ensure that we are actually nimble to take advantage of some of the time-sensitive grants. I'd also like to remind Council that any operating adjustment over $250,000 requires approval of the Commissioner, the Treasurer, and the CAO. Also, it should be pointed out that many of these budget adjustments that occur are simply housekeeping matters, moving funds around in a single department ID. I would like to specifically highlight Council's authority in relation to setting the budget calendar, approval of any business cases, any staff complement increases, any use of debt, reserves, as well as deferred revenues such as our gas tax and our development charges. In closing, I also want to remind Council that these amendments and adjustments are reported in the quarterly financial updates. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity, and I am open to any questions.
Ms. Murphy, thank you so much for that. You're welcome to join us back up here. I'll take a mover and seconder on the report and then take questions on both the report and presentation. Moved by Councillor Rigby, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Grenier. I see Councillor Height. Go ahead.
Yes, through to staff, regarding the quarterly reporting that we should be getting, we heard not that long ago that we don't get the first quarter sometimes because we're working on the budget. Second quarter we get, third quarter we get, and fourth quarter we don't normally get because we're working to finalize the budget. So that suggests we only get 2 reports. Are we getting 4 separate reports? Through you to staff.
Through the chair, that's our goal for next year. It is true, we don't, on the first year, it's not because we're working on, the first quarter, it's not because we're working on the budget, we're working on Q4 and the year end. So we do issue a Q4. We are missing a Q1, and I will acknowledge that. The intent is with our restructure that has gone on and our and the fact now that we do have PeopleSoft in place, that the intent is to have a Q1 report. And if I was to be so bold without these guys next to me elbowing me, you know, I think we should be even moving towards monthly reporting. But at this point in time, we're gonna shoot for quarterly reporting all 4 quarters for next year.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Grenier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, a couple of quick questions on this. I appreciate this, and I agree with all of it. Why do we need a bylaw for this? Why is this not policy and already practice?
Commissioner Burgess.
Through the chair, through review with legal counsel and through a review with other municipalities, most of the items that were embedded, the rules around here were embedded as a bylaw. And council approves it at that point in time. And therefore, in the future, if council wants to make certain adjustments to some of those rules, then it's within their, you know, their authority to do it. There's a number of other procedures that fall under this. Frankly, I'll give an example of what would be contained in a business case for a capital project. The types of information that would be contained in that. That would be part of the policies or policies and procedures, but in the bylaw it just says any capital program must have a business case presented to council. But we thought it was best that it's ingrained in the bylaw and council can review their bylaws on their regular basis.
Essentially strengthens the practice. I'm okay with that. I just concerned why we're gone on this long as an entity without this actually being enshrined. But anyway, the answer to the previous question inspired another question that I'm going to ask about the variance reports and how that we're going to create some ownership for the need to mitigate throughout the year and test those actions against the budget that we passed. I think you and I have had it through you to Mr. Chair. I've had this conversation with the commissioner that we tend not to have those conversations on an ongoing basis. And I think that if this particular thing tonight or any sort of change in practice is going to advance that, I think that's a good thing. But if the commissioner can comment on how best we can achieve that review of a frequent testing of the success of the budget process, I'd appreciate it.
Through the chair, I would agree with the councillor. We need to get better at continually monitoring our financial positions and to be nimble enough to make decisions in year. I think staff needs to work on putting those building blocks in place to provide that better information. We're along on the journey, but we're not quite there. And I think once we start providing more information to council, I think it would then be up to council to decide either through Corporate Services Committee or Audit Committee or through this committee, what other additional requests they may have of staff to make your job easier on the monitoring of the budget. But at this point in time, we're gonna try to, as I told to Councillor Height, we'll get to the Q4s with better information in comparison to budget, and we'll take further direction from council at that point in time.
If I could be just to suggest that the second and third quarter things are imperative. I think it's painfully unfair to test first quarter performance against a budget that's likely not passed or implemented at the time. So I think that a half a year of work throughout the corporation and then a review by council would be in order to sort of stop manufacturing work for yourself and work towards those targets. But I don't get to make that decision on my own. But I think for what it's worth, it's a program that I put in place in Welland as the budget chair, and it seemed to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Augustine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First, I want to start off by thanking staff for the clarity that they provided with this report. I had asked, and others had asked for specific items to be clarified, and staff have done that. So thanks very much to staff for doing that, and I'm very pleased with this and how it mirrors the other portion of the approvals that we have embedded. The discussion that we're having, Mr. Chair, about the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, etc. I didn't see it here on any of these agendas, and I'm going to raise it now because I don't know any other place to raise it, is that I had asked in corporate services that, and was assured several times that the variance report for this year would be here at the budget meeting, and that I know that we had some risks both for this year and next year, and some of them weren't included necessarily in the item here. So it was, my understanding was close to shy of $4 million or something for this year. So can we just hear about that and get an update on that, Mr. Chair?
Sure, I think that's fair in relation to the quarterly report conversation. However, the commissioner did present the budget presentation in which he talked about risks. So I'll try to ask you to be brief if I can.
I'm sure through the chair, and I do recognize that we did make a commitment to do that in a previous corporate services meeting. We are going to prepare some additional information. As far as in your budget, we are tracking better now than we were at the point in time of that request. I will commit to this council that I think next year we need to get on a more formal reporting methodology so that we have that regular items. But if what we can do, if council requires a bit more of an update prior to our second quarter report, I would be prepared to do something in the Friday correspondence with a memo to provide it if that's satisfactory.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just the discussion related to the quarterly reports. Just with our new computer systems that are now, I believe, back inoperable now and are producing reports, that this is really not going to be a difficult situation for staff to provide a regular report.
Through the chair, my director of finance may add on to it. The system, the biggest impact that the system has is for visibility of what is being committed to and spending, and we can forecast a little bit better. We still have, frankly, challenges on getting a clean balance sheet off. So the system has helped us with spend control and visibility to what we're intending to spend. There are still significant manual processes involved to obtain a balance sheet in this organization and to obtain what's called cutoff or clean cutoff for payables, what's a payable and what's not. We are working through that. So, and I believe if I'm going to give you a financial report, it's got to be both the balance sheet and the income statement. So we made leaps and bounds on commitment control, and we're still working through it on the balance sheet. So it is easier. I'm not going to deny that, but there's still some challenges we're facing.
So with the new, again, going back to the new system, then I get that my understanding from this is that you're still moving away from having manual input and having it done automatically as you go forward.
There's always a fair amount of manual implementation into the system and necessary review into it. The other challenge we have, which is a very manual process, is our ability to forecast. So where we are in March and how that was supposed to forecast. And we need to be able to when we do our budget, we also need to be able to forecast those in a better manner than, you know, simple measures of saying, take something divided by 12. We need to adjust those to variances.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that's carried. Thank you. There are 2 consent items for information, BRC C01 and 2. Both are follow-up information regarding matters we've already discussed. Put them, can I get a mover for both at this time? Moved by Councillor Gale, seconded by Councillor Timms. All those in favor? Seeing none, that is carried. Is there any other business? Councillor Grenier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize if this was taken up before the last council meeting, but there's been no mention of the public outreach this year and what we're going to be doing, and I wanted to make a suggestion. I know that former Commissioner Lewis had met with the nonprofit group that's done the open data work for almost 90 communities across Canada, and I would hope that we can rekindle that this time for about 1/3 the cost of what we spent on the public consultations. So if I could ask that somebody contact Open North, it's a nonprofit group that's based essentially on new grads from McGill, funded by the federal government, to come up. They have almost 90 communities across the country, London, Ottawa, Edmonton, so on. If we could look at that interactive public engagement budget tool that can be posted on our website with information capture, I would appreciate someone coming back and either suggesting why or why not that we would be involved in such a program.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I have a nod from staff. They will contact.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.